Joining us now in the studio is Moira Villiard. Moira is a visual artist who most recently worked on a mural project in conjunction with the centennial of the lynching in Duluth of Elias Clayton, Elmer Jackson, and Isaac McGhie. Moira, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
All right. I want to give you an opportunity to tell us about the mural, which I know is about the death of George Floyd while in police custody in Minneapolis. And it also happened to coincide with the 100th anniversary of the lynching in Duluth. And if that weren't enough, Juneteenth, which had its commemoration at the same time.
Right. Yeah. So the Mural Project was kind of an idea that came about, I guess, when I recognized that I think people were looking to activate the space more at the Clayton Jackson McGhie Memorial. And one of the things that I do in my artistic practice is really just focusing on ways to activate space. And so I reached out to dance and creatives and the Clayton Jackson McGhie Memorial after the spray painting that had happened there. And I just offered my facilitation skills and offered to do something.
Giving art a sort of direction.
Right, yep,
Right.
Exactly.
Right. You mentioned the spray painting, so for those who don't know, the memorial was spray painted in two locations, actually, two different handwritings, so that implies two different people. On the day, it was actually the afternoon of the, it becomes a blur, the first large protest in response to the death of George Floyd. And that sparked a lot of different reactions in the community. For many, the memorial itself is sacred. I mentioned, by the way, Mike Tuskin, who, being an indirect descendant of the woman who instigated the lynching or started it, or certainly had a great deal of responsibility, he says he finds it a place of solace. So, you know, it goes for so many different people. On the other hand, the young man, and one of them was identified, I don't know if the second one, Tagger, if you will, was identified, was, I'm told, African American and was responding to the police. His message in code I don't quite understand, and up on all my graffiti, was strongly condemning the police. So for those who wanted him to be arrested or entered into the criminal justice system, you had this irony of he's making a statement in a form of art about the police, and yet he would be turned over to the police. Luckily, that didn't happen.
Right.
What are your thoughts about that?
You know, I think stuff like that happens, and you know, I'm not the person that did it or from the background of the person that did it. But I think, you know, for young folks, having space is important. And, you know, as an adult now, you know, one of the things that I wanted to offer was that option because, you know, there is spray paint and that is a form of resistance in some ways. But there's other ways that are less accessible. Like, I feel like, you know, youth wouldn't have had that option to create murals, you know, to have those supplies there on their own without, you know, adults in the community stepping up and creating that space for them to use their voices in the way that they want to. So when I was, you know, facilitating that process, I invited Carla Hamilton, Delphin Starr, two great African-American painters in the community, and we really designated that space for young folks and for Indigenous and Black folks to kind of come together and without a filter, you know, put whatever they have to say on those canvases that were there. And, you know, it's kind of interesting when you have, you know, a lot of people were asking me if I was worried that people were going to write profanity all over the place or really, like, get angry in that space.
But art includes profanity
exactly.
sometimes, right?
And for me, it was like, well, maybe, you know, if that happens, maybe the space isn't any longer, you know, the Clayton Jackson McGhie Memorial, but there's another place for that work to be. That doesn't mean we have to stop people from, you know, writing what they feel. But there's just kind of that interesting thing where when people are working collaboratively, or when people feel a sense of ownership, I guess, of something, there's just this silent energy that goes between everyone as they're working on stuff where they don't have to plan it, they don't need restriction. But the artwork kind of comes to life.
And that's what art does, right?
Yeah.
Art, when it's particularly unplanned and doesn't have restriction, it may be, it's my opinion, and everybody has an opinion on art, but it's purest form.
Right.
Right. I don't want to harp on it, but I do want to go back to the graffiti because on the one hand, in a way, we're here talking about it because we're here talking about the art because of the graffiti. Mm-hmm. Graffiti is, for better or for worse, a legitimate art form. It certainly is a form of expression. It made perfectly good sense, if you think about it, for both the people who performed the graffiti that day to do so on that day because there were at least 1,000 people who were there right before they tagged, if you will. Right. So it certainly got attention and it certainly got a message out. But again, there were people who the art of the memorial has its own message and people who felt strongly that that should be inviolate and never touched, if you will. So it's evolved, and I noticed now, I was just there a few hours ago, that there's chalk. In fact, it's been there for the last couple weeks now, which is perfectly removable. The graffiti, by the way, was removed. Anyone who's worried about that, took actually just 20 minutes or something. Apparently, the city knows how to do this. And the chalk is, I think, transformed the memorial into now an interactive art space. Yeah,
definitely. I think even after we completed the initial 3 murals, Stefan Witherspoon went and got another panel for people to write on and to continue to add to. I mean, that was the purpose.
I think that was the evolution after that.
Exactly.
People found the surface in the chalk, right?
Yeah, a few days later, Carla and Stefan had reached out and just wanted to make sure, you know, what supplies they could use on the panels and put another one out there. And that was the goal, you know, was to really just activate that space. And for me, you know, I have a certain set of skills, you know, that I contributed, but really it was the community coming together and making that happen and directing the way they wanted it to go. Even, you know, I have to mention Delphin again, coming up with there's a fist with an American flag in it that is in the painting of George Floyd. And Sandra Oyenloy was the one who suggested that we should add Breonna Taylor to the...
I was there when that was added, right?
Yeah,
I saw that. Right.
To the design. Right. And again, Delphin's idea was to allow people to write the names of people who are victims of police brutality. And it just became this, you know, all these ideas just bouncing off of each other. Yeah. Right.
And so the 3 murals are there, or is it 4, did you say now? Or?
Yeah, there's 3, and then there's a 4th one that is just a free-form panel, I think, that people are going up to on their own time to add to. Sure.
And are there plans to move them somewhere else, or for, you know, when I see the picture constantly of where the Cup Foods market was, where Mr. Floyd died or was killed, it looks similar to your mural. And I don't mean yours personally, but to our mural, let's put it that way.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's, I guess, the skill that I wanted to offer was, you know, I felt like people wanted a space to commemorate, and, you know, the image of the people that you're commemorating is really powerful, as you see with, you know, the Clayton Jackson McGhie Memorial as a whole, as this representation of actual people. And so I really just wanted to contribute that and allow people to direct what kind of memorial that would be, whether it would be messages, you know, in mourning or messages of social change, all of that. It could all kind of come together.
We knew the centennial was coming. The original plan was to have 10,000 people there in response to the 10,000 people who were there 100 years before for the wrong reason. Yeah. We ended up with 1,000 and then another 1,000. With no idea that this would become an interactive art space and really a gathering spot for protests. Where do you think, what do you think will be happening at the memorial next year? Or would you even venture a guess?
You know, I would just love to see more space in general. You know, the memorial is that first step of like carving out a space for, you know, African heritage folks in the community, but there needs to be more space and more space for people to be activated inside of. So
all right. Well, we'll see you then next year, right? And in the meantime, thank you so much, Moira Villiard.
Yeah.